Every big win starts long before game day. On any given Monday, we go where cameras don't. Behind the contracts, the calls, and the chaos. We'll road trip with scouts, visit iconic campuses, step inside replay booths, and walk up to the luxury suites. Real organizations, real stories, real decisions. Lace up your cleats, buckle your chin strap. Here comes our GM, Matthew Miley.
Today on Any Given Monday, our guest is Derek Vandermeer, Director of Athletics at Bowling Green State University. Go Falcons, and I made sure to wear my BGSU sweatshirt here.
Good, that's good.
He came to BG from the University of Arizona, where he had served as the Associate Vice President and Chief Operations Officer for the Wildcats Athletics Department since 2018. Before Arizona, Derek was the Vice President of Advancement, Communication, and Strategic Initiatives at Austin Peay, where he also previously served as Director of Intercollegiate Athletics and worked with our mutual friend, former Austin Peay men's golf coach, Kirk Caden. I texted with Kirk yesterday, and he said to tell you hello.
No, that's great.
He started his career as an academic advisor at Central Michigan University and worked his way up to Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Athletics Director. Born and raised in South Africa to missionary parents, Derek attended CMU University, go Chippewas, where he was a student athlete and earned academic All-MAC honors as a co-captain of CMU football in 1995. He earned a bachelor's degree and master's degree from CMU. Before you were a Division I athletic director and before being a football captain at Central Michigan, you were raised in South Africa by missionary parents. How did that upbringing shape your values, and how did it influence how you lead BGSU today?
Well, I think one of the primary things is that you grow up in an environment where you don't have all the resources, and you find the way to thrive, to grow, to be successful in life. I think that's probably one of the most important things. It's that ability to strive through difficulties and challenges and find opportunities. I think from a very early age, what kind of drove me and motivated me.
And while at CMU, you were both a football captain and an academic all-honor student. What habits helped you balance academics and athletics, and how does that experience shape BGSU's academic culture, especially with a record 363 athletes earning a 3.0 or higher this past spring?
I think probably the most significant thing is discipline and everything that you do. I'm not saying that I always understood, maybe practiced that early on when I was in school. One thing I learned as I transitioned to college is that there was really no boundary to what I was capable of achieving. It was more understanding the process and the discipline to walk through that process every day to achieve success. And I saw that academically as I, moved through school, is that, I really undertook 3 different majors, and it was journalism, political science, areas of study that I really enjoyed and was passionate about, but was willing to spend the time and the effort to be very disciplined to master my skills in those areas.
And early in your career, you worked as an academic advisor. How did starting on the academic side influence the way you approach leadership in athletics? And why is that perspective still important for administrators today?
Service. One of the things that I tell all my staff is that when you're on the staff side of that equation, the primary mission is to serve both students and coaches and our campus community and the academic mission of the institution as well. Coming out of the academic perspective of athletics from very early on and seeing that direct alignment with the mission of what we're doing in athletics, with the mission of the university and the success of individuals that were, attempting to try to fully realize themselves and prepare themselves for careers after athletics. And that discipline of that, we're very early on in connecting my value system with that discipline has really impacted how I see the industry of higher education.
Um, and I've had the chance to interview other athletic directors with very different paths to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Goodrich talked about having a very intentional plan early on, even while pursuing his MBA at the University of Notre Dame. On the other hand, Josh Burlow, who also earned his MBA from Notre Dame and who is the athletic director at Denver, he described a path that was less scripted, focused more on adding value wherever he was and letting opportunities develop over time. How would you describe your own path, and how much of it was planned and how much of it evolved as you went?
I think the only plan I have had is to constantly be challenging myself. Is when you get into any environment or job, you can quickly become complacent with the task at hand, and it becomes in routine. Every day you're working through, kind of the assigned responsibilities, things that you've been asked to do, but the willingness to take on new challenges, to learn and grow, to find people that are going to challenge you and make you better, and to seek opportunities that allow you to do that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a change of title, because I think sometimes when you change you're kind of you're chasing titles, you're chasing certain jobs at certain locations, or you're really looking at money. That compensation should drive maybe your decision making. You really make poor decisions. So focus on things that are constantly challenging, that are helping you to evolve. And as you chase those challenges and you're learning and growing and being innovative, opportunities that really present themselves, because they're giving you that opportunity to kind of to grow into those different roles and things that continue to challenge you. So I think that has probably been more my philosophy: is don't worry about I need to be an athletics director by a certain age at a certain institution or a certain type of institution. I'm not so fixated on one pinpoint location. It's more a philosophy of moving directionally in and finding opportunities to learn and grow.
And now let's talk about something that happened this past year while you were athletic director. It's in football. The hiring of Eddie George. It generated massive national attention, billions of impressions online. Beyond name recognition, what convinced you that he was the right fit for BG?
Well, you have to put those achievements and accomplishments of what Coach George has done earlier in his career or during college. You have to put those aside. You have to understand the value system that you look in the person that you hire, and make sure that regardless of the reputation and fame that someone has, that they're aligned with those value systems. Those things for me are looking at individuals that are service driven, see individuals that truly value the academic mission of higher education, an individual that's going to look at that mission of the university as primary and what we do in athletics as secondary. It looks at winning, but how to win, making sure that we identify student athletes that reflect the mission of the institution. Then a person that is absolutely determined to win, and to make sure that they're developing a culture and a program of people that are willing to sacrifice, work hard, grow, and develop. And those are the things that you focus on. I think if you get the benefit of hiring somebody that has name and recognition, that should be secondary to making sure that value alignment is the most important thing.
And something else that goes along with these mid-major hires is sometimes there could be power conference interest. And a little example I thought of here was Kurt Cignetti, started at James Madison, really good coach there, and then got picked up by Indiana a couple of years ago. Is there a concern that if success comes quickly, that then the power conference interest will build up, or is that simply a risk worth taking to elevate a program at the mid-major level?
Whether it's coaches or staff, you have to have the same attitude. My job is to develop student athletes, to develop staff, to develop coaches, to have those opportunities professionally and personally. I think everybody that works in this industry that's motivated by growth and success is looking for a constant challenge. It's similar to my story about what motivates me. How can I grow? And growth never stops. I think, for people that are in this industry, that if you're fixated on that goal of winning and sustaining success, you have a mindset that's looking for growth, innovation, change, entrepreneurialism, and you become a person that's constantly looking at how can I develop. My job as a leader in this industry to reflect that value set, to make sure our staff understand that, and with that comes that desire to challenge themselves, to seek other opportunities. So I fully support it. I don't see it as negative in any way. I actually encourage that mindset and make sure that individuals really understand that they make the right decisions when those opportunities present themselves.
Did you really anticipate how viral this hiring of Eddie George would be? Because how do you convert that kind of attention into long-term momentum rather than just it's like your 5 minutes of fame?
Yeah. The job that I had is to make sure that 5 minutes of fame translates into other successful outcomes. And it's not just a blip on the radar. It's not just that Andy Warhol brief moment of fame. It's a longer term, how do we translate that and generate momentum that is sustainable? And I think that the balance of that's very important. If you just ride that quick wave and are not leveraging it into recruiting and not leveraging it into how we're supporting the brand and identity of the university, really miss the opportunity to make it sustainable and not just it's not a moment, a fleeting moment.
And how do you balance these bold, attention-grabbing moves with long-term sustainability and institutional fit?
It's a good question. I think, when you look at everything that we do, how is it value aligned? And how do we ensure that those moves are really part of the building blocks of what we're building? Here's a great example of this, is that, Coach George comes in and he does have a significant national brand. He does have a significant influence. It gets back to the fundamental value system of we're looking at how we all support the growth and success of the university and not just athletics. So Coach George has been, an advocate for the student experience on campus. He understands his role of being an influencer, and he continues to sustain that role in not only contributing to the successful building of a team, but a program, a department, and a university.
And now, let's step a little bit into the BGSU role and vision. So you arrived at Bowling Green in 2022 after working in the Pac-12 conference at the time at Arizona. How much adjustment was required moving from a power conference to an environment like the MAC? Were there habits or assumptions you had to rethink?
Before I was at Arizona, I was at Austin Peay State University in Tennessee. It was an FCS institution that had limited resources. Before that, I was a member of another Mid-American Conference school for close to 18 years after playing there for 6 years. The skills are transferable, the scale is different, and the impact is different. That's probably the biggest adjustment. I think with these moves, I've been able to understand that scale and impact, but still invest in the relationships and the people that are really necessary in order to ensure success. The one thing that you learn, whether you're at Austin Peay or Bowling Green or Arizona, is that people solve problems. If you think that resources, technology has all the answers, what you do is you miss the fundamental critical aspect of building programs, and is that you still need to have people that firmly understand the mission and are supporting day-to-day the relationships in the department to achieve success. And I think you see that's a great example of this is you look at programs like Indiana that have built this year. You see a head coach that can operate with limited, and you see Indiana, and you don't equate them with what you consider kind of the blue blood programs of the country with unlimited resources. There's a limited capacity, but a coach that knows how to leverage relationships within that capacity to achieve great success. So I think that doesn't change based upon scale. That's a fundamental principle of building any program regardless of scale.
Do you remember when you first realized Bowling Green was a place you wanted to lead, and where were you when that first conversation with the university happened?
Well, my relationship with Bowling Green goes back to the 90s. And when I was a student athlete, and I used to come into Bowling Green and compete. It continued when I was an administrator and I'd bring teams down and come to this campus. This university always had a very unique culture. The culture is something that always prioritizes relationships and people and community. And it was very evident in the support that they received, and the brand of how they built it was around that sense of community and identity. It diversified it and uniquely identified it within the conference. And it still is our greatest asset today. And I think building around that, and seeing it how it was built is what identified and connected me to this university. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I didn't have to explore or research what was the culture of this university. I clearly understood it, wanted to embrace it, wanted to be a part of it.
And when you evaluate the health of your department, what matters most? Is it wins, academics, culture, fundraising, fan engagement, or is it just how these pieces all fit together?
I think it's Bill Walsh wrote a book, Score Takes Care of Itself. There's a quote in there about maintaining a winning performance standard, the standard of performance that's exceptional. Don't worry about championships. Don't worry about winning. Build the processes that contribute towards success and focus day to day, relentless processes that are what are considered championship standards of how you do business, and watch what happens. Make sure that the people embrace those standards, hire people, retain people that are willing to contribute to that standard, and completely still pursue it and watch what happens. And I think that's the focus. I don't talk about the championships. I don't talk about winning. I think that's a footnote of culture. And that's really, it's not, championships are not culture and should never be. The standard is the culture of how we perform, how we act, how we treat each other, how we do our business. And the footnotes are the listing of things that result because you maintain that standard.
Now let's jump into something else that went viral at Bowling Green this year was this season Pudge the Cat.
Yes.
Unexpectedly became a national phenomenon, even earning a feature on ESPN. How intentional is branding at a place like BGSU? And what did that moment reveal about how mid-majors can break through nationally?
The most powerful part of what we do is story. Story of our student athletes, a story of things that are unique to us and our identity. And we start to shape the narrative around things. Which was a great example of that. It was really started not because someone just, from the outside walked in and saw Pudge, thought he was really cute and started to create this narrative. We had a student athlete that starting to play in the social media space, went to the locker room, was telling a story about, hey, we have a cat in the locker room. Well, that student athlete knew how to tell a story and a narrative around the experience of what was happening around the team, and that started the momentum, and that started to get live. And then the institution supported us in sharing that momentum and sharing that story and being a part of it. It became part of an identity for the season, and it was very exciting to be around. But it's also great to see how so many people embraced that and enjoyed the story. So great opportunity.
It was great. It was great. Now, staying with media exposure here, MAC schools often play on weekday games for television on ESPN. You got your MACtion Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's always those MAC games on. From an athletic director's perspective, how do you weigh that exposure against the reality that rivalries like the Battle of I-75 between BG and Toledo traditionally thrive on Saturday afternoons in October?
Well, we've managed to move that rivalry to weekend the last couple of years, which have been really good. I think the longer term challenge is we've seen the benefit of those back on our campus now that we weigh, is there real value to having those midweek? Do they really drive some increased viewership? Or do we continue to weigh the value of those the campus community? So that stated, I think that our brand is unique. Those national games and stories we've introduced in the month of November have differentiated us and defined a brand. You've also seen other conferences start to move to October. So we're not new, we're not different anymore. Now everybody's trying to match that and be a part of that brand identity in their own unique way. We have to continue to evolve and judge value proposition of midweek versus weekend games. And that's something that I think we'll continue to do if it's right. If it's right for the conference and does serve our mission. But I think at the time, it really was beneficial. I think that market's becoming more saturated. We have to think now critically, where do we want that to fall?
And how do you navigate those conference obligations, television partners, and fan experience when those interests sometimes, and most of the time, don't always perfectly align?
I would say they align more maybe than the public thinks, because what is the purpose of athletic? Is trying to increase the exposure, distribution of the brand nationally, and increase the awareness of the value proposition of Mid-American Conference schools. So when we are creative and we place those brands where you have 500,000, 1 million people watching a game around the country or more, are we fulfilling that mission? And I think that it is. Being a part of FBS is another great opportunity and proposition for our institution, because you watch games on Saturday, whether early in the year we're playing top 5, top 10, 20 brands around the country, and having the opportunity to be visible and sometimes winning those games, or having the chance to be on the ticker in the months of October with our own games within our conference. That brand alignment with strong brands and that are significant to what is college football helps us and elevate the mission and tell the story of who we are. So I think there is alignment. It gets back to your willingness to sacrifice maybe one opportunity for another to make sure we're fulfilling that obligation.
And now I want to talk about something that I saw that you're a really big, strong advocate for, is BGSU's Life Design program. Mm-hmm. What problem was it created to solve, and why is it especially important in today's college athletics environment?
One of the things with all students today is making sure that they don't see athletics as the end game. At some point, even for Michael Jordan, he stopped playing basketball. And LeBron James is going to stop playing basketball. And you have to have the skills to translate your brand and your success into some long-term value. Let's say you have all the money that you've earned all the money you need to earn professionally. Significance becomes the next thing that's important to you. Is what is life? What is your life after everything is done? What life design does is fills those gaps, understanding that there's more to life than just one experience or one opportunity. It's a life of learning, a life of growth, a life of being exposed to how to manage your decision making and your career preparation and transitions and change. How are you going to manage when those changes are presented to you? And do you embrace them? Or are we going to give you a scaffolding or a structure to how to manage that change? And that's the benefit of life.
And as a former student athlete, how do you balance encouraging professional aspirations while also preparing athletes for the reality that, for what you said, is careers really just begin after the final whistle? And like Michael Jordan, like you said, you could argue that he was maybe more successful after he retired from basketball and continued his life in business. So what's that like?
I think there's there's not a competing interest with the pursuit of excellence on the field, as long as it is supported by the skills to help transition and translate that aspiration into another part of your life. What do I mean by that? There's only one way to achieve success, and that is a relentless, absolute commitment to what you're doing. And we learned that in athletes. As a college football player, it was 100% sacrifice every day of my life in order to achieve the objectives that I wanted on the field. Learning to take that focus and determination and translate it to other aspects of your life is it's a really critical skill set. If you understand how they're different and how they're the same and how to leverage those opportunities.
Compared to 10 or 20 years ago, what do student athletes need more of, and what do they need less of?
Well, I think they need more exposure outside the bubble in which they're sometimes currently living. That's where, philosophically being aligned with the campus community and leveraging campus resources and getting them to engage and interact with other students on campus, having being a part of student organizations. I think there was a time in athletics where the enterprise was really part of the academic mission. I think that's becoming harder and harder at the larger institutions because you become so siloed where you brought in so many resources to solve the student athlete challenges by kind of creating academic advising support, life design, life skills designs, career transitioning. They're all housed in athletics. One of the things that we believe is that don't segregate students, athletes from the student experience. Have them be streamlined with that experience, because I think that streamlining and association with the campus experience is going to be really beneficial for that transition after college. The more siloing and the more of they're closed off from that, I think it really hurts in the development. So I think more of the alignment with campus and the more of the integration with the student experience.
Yeah. And now let's jump over to a big pressing issue in not just football, but all collegiate sports right now, NIL and transfer portal. So there's a narrative that NIL and transfer portal turn mid-majors into kind of a minor leagues system for power conferences, like some may say a school like James Madison. I know I talked about them earlier, but their whole starting offense and I think almost starting defense is gone for next year, and they're just seen as like this feeder school. Do you agree with that, or does the portal actually help schools like Bowling Green by attracting players who want opportunity and playing time?
They both live simultaneously. I think you are attracting because you are building and providing that opportunity. You are a feeder system for the top of the structure. I don't view that as a negative, as long as we don't lose the academic mission and what we're trying to achieve and providing the right support. As long as athletes are continuing to prioritize programming, that they're not justifying their academic decisions because of athletic participation. They need to choose their path and they need to commit to that. I think if we lose academic mission, then I've got a problem. But it has nothing to do with athletic participation, whether we are a feeder or not. It's more of, are we aligned with the mission? And if that mission is able to persist as they are advancing or being promoted into other opportunities.
And how do you build roster continuity and culture when player movement is now part of the landscape?
Well, there's a lot of, outside of the professional leagues, there's a lot of organizations that have a lot of change. There's a lot of minor league baseball teams that have a lot of change. Free agency and hockey, in the CHL, the AHL, these different sort of leagues, there is change, and they have to build team culture and chemistry. It demands great leadership that's very attentive to how people influence change and grow an organization. And you have to be much more intentional about team building activities. I think that you're not going to develop culture over 4 years. You've got to have sustainable culture that's really embedded in what you are. As people change, that still doesn't change. So I think the challenge to do it is greater, but it's not impossible with great leadership.
And here's something that I hear a lot from older fans, even some of my family members, is that people say that Division I college athletics isn't pure anymore. That athletes aren't really students, and only places like Army, Navy, Air Force still represent what college sports used to be. As an athletic director, how do you respond to that kind of criticism?
I would agree with the statement that it's not what it used to be. I think that's a fair statement. Change is inherent. That one institutional, one experience. For most, I would say for some. I don't know if for most is a fair statement, because you had, what I heard today is that there were 3,000 student athletes in the transfer portal in FBS, close to 10,000 student athletes across all divisions that went in the transfer portal. That doesn't represent, I believe, greater than a third of total student athletes participating, I don't believe. So this experience doesn't. For some, it does. I don't know if that erodes below the threshold of what is considered pure or impure. It's changed. And so for me, for someone to define what is pure, is pure 100%. We all buy in. We all agree that this is the only way it should be. I think innovation and change is necessary. Whether we agree or disagree with how, I think we have a lot of improvements to work through to make this a better process, to make it a more pure process. Maybe if that's the definition, but I think there's opportunity there. But I don't think we've eroded what has made college sports great. And maybe the problem is we're looking at that experience strictly through the lens of maybe men's basketball and football, because outside of that particular lens, all of the sports have always had open transfer requirements. Students have always transferred seeking opportunity. That goes back 30 years when I was serving as an academic advisor, working with students that were transferring in and transferring out. I don't know. I don't know if it's a fair assessment that we've lost the heart. I think it's changed. And I also look at, what's happened in college football the last 3 years, where you have Ohio State, Michigan, Indiana winning the national championship, is showing that maybe there's more access. So, the concept of what has changed in the industry, that has somehow diminished the value of what we do. And I think I struggle with that. It's change. And when we go through change, I think what we're going to see is people are not going to be happy. I think they're used to an experience in a certain way. But that is going to change and evolve. And I think that we continue to maintain the success of these programs, and also ensure that we're connecting with the fans as that change is occurring. And I think that one of the points I made was really about how the majority of student athletes are not moving on. They're staying and they're having that traditional experience. You have this population, which is less than a third in football and basketball, that are maybe moving more. It doesn't change or diminish that experience. I mean, if 30, 40 years ago, education was distributed through a traditional classroom setting, and everybody went to class and went to college and lived in college. And then there's something called online education was introduced. Did that diminish the quality of the educational experience? No, it was a change. And there's a lot of people thought that changed because only education can only occur in a classroom setting. I think we're starting to understand, no, it doesn't. There's opportunity there. Let's be creative and innovative. We can still educate and fulfill the mission, but we have to accept the change that comes with that as well.
And speaking on change here a little bit, is you've worked across multiple conferences and institutions over a long career. What has changed most about leadership in college athletics, and what has remained surprisingly constant?
Um, what has remained surprisingly constant is that pursuit of excellence, really ensuring we're developing people to handle the challenges associated with the industry day in and day out. It is, trying to build a culture that wants to have and live under that absolute metric of winning and losing. I love that we get to the end of the season and we can measure, did we do what we set out to do or did we not? Because we believe that every part of that performance standard is contributing toward success and championships. And when you're not achieving that or you're not where you need to be, you can be absolute. That hasn't changed. That's still going to be the metric that defines who and what we do. But I think what has probably changed more than anything is even we talk about the transfer portal. I think our staff and our coaches have become much more mobile. I think you're going to see less and less of those career people that are at one institution. They're going to be mobile. They're going to move. They're going to have other experiences and continue to grow. That's not a reflection just of the industry. That's a reflection of the workforce that we're working with today. Younger people are looking for opportunities. They're willing to change. They're willing to move to find those professional opportunities more than they've been in the past. Our industry reflects that. And I think that accepting that reality and learning to adjust as we go through change, even from a staffing and coaching standpoint, is necessary to achieve success.
And now with social media and external noise louder than ever, how do you stay grounded and make decisions that align with your values and the university's mission?
That is getting extremely challenging because you can't listen to the choir all the time. You've got to understand that narrative can be framed and you can lose control of the message very quickly. But learning how to be much more, what I would say, transparent about why you're doing what you're doing and communicating honestly and openly, it becomes much more important. You can't hide behind the curtain and hope that things just go away. You have to address things, and you have to watch what's happening and seeing the miscommunication. You have to correct things that are inaccurate. You have to get ahead of sometimes stories that move rapidly, and are able to pivot very quickly. But I think that responsibility to make sure that you're proactive in that communication is really critical.
And now, for students who dream of working in collegiate or professional athletics, what should they start doing now that most people don't realize actually matters?
What is toughest for young people to realize is that this is an industry of relationships. The ability to build strong relationships, to have a network of people that they can reach out to and call and really ensure that those relationship skills are really a priority, are really critical. Early on in my career, I'd probably say I defined my perception of this industry as I have to be the hardest working and most knowledgeable person in the industry in order to succeed. I'm not saying that still isn't very important, but you could be very stagnant in your evolution in your career if that's what you only work on. It has to be coupled with relationships with people across the industry where you're fearless in the pursuit of those relationships in order to have the opportunities. There's a lot of really hardworking, very intelligent, smart people that stop professionally and stop growing because they never valued that relationship side of that equation.
And now it's time for my probably favorite time of the show is the lightning round. I got a couple of quick answer, fun questions for you here. So what is one sport that ADs secretly stress over the most?
Secretly, I think it's very publicly. I think the sports that are the most visible, that have the biggest impact in campus culture and community today, football and basketball seem to have that impact. So you're always thinking about, are we doing everything we can to achieve success? So there's no I mean, unless you have some, particular passion for one particular sport, I would say the sports that have the largest impact with your base.
What is the best part of a game day before a kickoff?
Seeing people walk into the stadium, watching tailgating, watching the community that you're trying to build around the program, making sure that people are having that positive experience. I'd probably say is the best moment for me. I love the energy before the game.
For sure. What would be a tougher job? Or what is a tougher job? An AD or a head coach?
I probably say equitable. The same. I can't put one over the other. They're both tough.
Where's the best pizza place on campus?
Well, I would have to probably go with 516 Pizza. My son works there.
Nice. What is the most misunderstood role in an athletic department?
Misunderstood role? Probably a compliance person. I think that's getting harder and harder to do as the rules have changed so substantially. Where I was a compliance officer for 12 years, and I remember having to turn in a violation of a student that was had a family and was working part-time at McDonald's, but if you were on a scholarship, you weren't allowed to work. So I'm sitting here turning in a kid who's just trying to make ends meet because the rules say you can't do it. Now, 30 years later, we're paying athletes. So it's that conflict of people are always looking at the rules going, these are silly. Yeah, but they're the rules. You can't live scout. You can't come in a camera. Can't come in a stadium and have a camera in your eyeglasses and videotape the opposing sideline. I mean, and I've argued with enough Michigan fans that, that's a problem because you may disagree with the rule, but it's been the rule for 30 years, So it's that sort of argument about, what's a good rule and what's a bad rule.
And now, going off the rule things a little bit, is if you could change one rule in any sport tomorrow, what would it be?
One rule. Well, the transfer portal windows and season have got to be adjusted in sports. I say one thing that bothers me most about football is spring football. Given all the changes that have happened, it doesn't make sense anymore. Having individuals go out there and get to 15 days in the middle of the spring and you don't play again until August makes no sense. I mean, it has to almost look like the NFL where you have mini camps and you start those maybe in April, March, and you use them as a progression to support participation in the fall. The most injuries occur is when you have these big, long downtime, and then all of a sudden you go to full speed. If you have to ease into the sport is in order to mitigate injury and risk. And we're doing that, there's acclimatization windows in all these sports on how do you gradually adjust to increase hitting and increasing activity. So things that don't support that acclimatization is proven to be dangerous. And those are things that need to change right away.
Behind that,
Mm-hmm.
if you had an NIL deal in the 1990s, who would be your sponsor and why?
Well, 1990s, Buffalo Wild Wings. I spent way too much time at Buffalo Wild Wings in college. So I'd want an infinite amount of wings.
Never bad. So could you tackle Eddie George today? And could you tackle him in the 90s?
Well, I was an offensive lineman. Thank God I didn't have to tackle him. Highly doubt they could have tackled him in the 90s. Now, he's the same age as I am roughly. And you can tell, I'd be willing to tell him this. I feel that he's lost a few steps, so I'm going to go with I could tackle him today.
Maybe we'll have to see sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the final question here is, what are you doing on any given Monday?
Any given Monday, it is, you start the week with defining the mission for the week. And because you have to be on task, you can't afford downtime, can't afford to lose focus and mission. And it starts the morning with a very clear reflection of what you have to achieve that week. So any given Monday, it is defining the mission, ensuring alignment, and then making sure that the week and the progress is meeting that standard.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this interview with me.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.